Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup CDL podcast. We're back, guys. It's been a little bit longer of a break than we had expected. We'd wanted to be back last week, but unfortunately, I was sick. As you can tell, my voice is not 100%, but it's getting back to perfect. It's getting back to 100% there. So I'm not 100%, but I'm definitely able to do it this week. Last week I was not. That would have sounded really bad had I tried to do this last week, but it's okay. We're back, and I am joined as always by my co-host CDLMetrics. How are you doing on this Tuesday night? Or no, sorry, no, this is Wednesday.
I'm doing
How are you
it.
doing on this Wednesday night?
Yeah, yeah. You made me think for a second. It is Wednesday as we're recording. I'm
Yes.
doing good. As you can see, I'm fully decked out in Green Bay Packers gear.
Yes.
Die-hard fan from Wisconsin. Yeah, Packers, Badgers, Brewers, Bucks, everything Wisconsin. I'm a fan of. To see them win in Dallas the way they did, I have to wear this the rest of the week. I don't know if they're gonna win in San Francisco this weekend, but just crushing Dallas, how we did, it made my season. We've already exceeded expectations. No one thought we'd be in the playoffs, and Jordan Love is crushing it. And we have a shot to win this weekend. Will it happen? Probably not. But this Packers team is fun, so I'm fired up about that. I didn't watch a ton of CDL last weekend because the playoffs were on. I did catch a handful of the key matches, and I looked over the scores and everything, but yeah, I'm excited for CDL this weekend, but just know that I might be prioritizing NFL once again.
I would also like to add that I am extremely happy the Packers won too, because my biggest bet of the weekend was on the Packers spread and money line against the Dallas Cowboys. As a matter of fact, I was messaging some friends earlier in the week. I think I literally said, because I got 7.5, which was one of the first lines. I was messaging some of my friends on Sunday, like hours after the first lines came out, and I said, this is very clearly the Mike McCarthy gets fired game. I literally, on Sunday, a week before the game even happened, I was like, now, to be fair, Mike McCarthy has yet to be fired. I'm assuming he's hiding somewhere in the Dallas Cowboys practice facility from Jerry Jones at this point. But it was almost prescient how it was like, yeah, no, there's no way the Cowboys are winning this game. And there's many reasons for that, but this is a CDL podcast, not an NFL podcast. So we'll focus more on the CDL. But anyways, no, yeah, and as you mentioned, yeah, I was diverting my time between the NFL and the CFL over the weekend. It's not bad. Normally in a regular year, last week would have been it for matches. There would have only been 3 weeks of matches, so that would have been it. I don't mind extra matches. I do, however, mind not this major, but next major, where we start really spacing them out. We start doing 2 matches on Friday, and that's going to get a little tedious. And I feel like, to some extent, this is actually already a little tedious as well. There have already been some production issues on the CDL side as well, but some of the matches are pretty competitive, and they've been relatively predictable, so I think we'll get into that in a second here. Let's start off here with the Race to 1580 update. And yeah, last time we talked about this, I had a lead, and I think it's a slightly bigger lead at this point.
It's about the same. You took an early lead after week 1, and you've just stayed in front the whole way. But yeah, I think right now at least our first few picks were great, and then I screwed up a couple times. I probably should have taken Surge over Breach. And then, Miami is killing it for you. LA Gorillas over Carolina was a smart pick at the end for you. So far, so good for you, at least.
Yeah. I will say, though, and if you look at this here, we could do a very quick diagram here. Phase, Optic, Ultra, and Subliners, look at this. It's exactly... And this shows you that this is a Big Four league. That's it. Period. End of sentence. There are 4 teams that are good, and to be fair, even Optic here. Okay, I think they've only played. They've played among some of the lower amounts of games too. This is not Optic's fault. Optic is still right there. This is basically equal, right? And these teams are both combining for, I'm assuming, 80 out of the 140, 100. They're dominant, and you could very clearly see that subdivision between here are the top 4 and then here are the not top 4. And you have some contenders in there, like you have Surge, and you have Miami, and you have LAG, and to some extent Boston seems fraudulent, and Miami also seems there's 4, and then there's maybe room for 1 or 2 more, but then there's Drek. And it's really funny because, at least in my data, which I'm not completely ready to publish yet, just because there were some games that it was bang on and some games that it was terribly wrong. And you just have that because even for last week, some teams only played 3 games. Now everybody's played at least 5, so it's better. I'd like one more week of that, and then we'll put some data. I'll probably put some data out before the major. But like last week, it was the only time I've ever seen it when it was basically like 99% chance this team wins, 99% chance this team wins, 90 like it is. Some of these are the most lopsided projections I've ever seen. Now this week again cleans that up, but like you can have weeks when it's okay, these top 4 teams are playing not top 4 teams and we know what's going to happen before the season begins. And you can even use an example of the Optic versus Las Vegas. It's okay, yeah, they came out and Legion came out and surprised them in game 1 and game 2. But it was like you were never like, "Oh, Legion's got this." No, it was never that way. After game 2, it was like Optic just locked them down and shut down and basically ended it, right? And it's really stark how it's 4 teams care about this and 8 kind of don't really, if that makes sense. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's all well said. I think there is a for sure top 4. There may even be a separation between those 4, and we'll get answers to those this weekend. I know my top 2 teams that I drafted, FaZe and Optic, play each other. Your 2 top teams of Toronto and New York play each other. So maybe we'll find out that there's actually a top 2 and then the next 2 and then the 8 after that. And I think eventually we'll start to narrow down on that back 8 and realize, okay, here's a chunk of 4 teams that look okay, and then these other 4 look bad. And that'll fluctuate throughout the year, obviously. But yeah, the one thing that we were most confident about was that those 4 teams that have always been great in this league are still great, and they should make champs just fine. They should be competing for majors every time there's one that rolls around. Yeah, I think we hit the nail on the head pretty well there. Yeah, I just hope that my teams start winning more because I don't like seeing you in the lead. But the major will obviously change things quite a bit once those points come through.
The interesting thing will be, though, that just because you're non-top 4 or top 2 basically, just because your non-top 4 teams aren't succeeding yet. So like a lot of points are in the major itself, right? So like FaZe wins the major, we're tied basically, right? And that's just how it goes, right? If you get Optic FaZe major final, you're gonna take the lead, right? Because there are more points built into the major, which to be fair doesn't really help. It doesn't really matter so much for individual teams, but for a contest like this, it matters a lot. That matters a lot in terms of that, just because of the sheer volume of games each team are teams are playing. But on the flip side, though, even if your teams aren't so great right now, it actually increases the odds of team changes. For example, if you're Surge or even LAG at this point, okay, these guys go into the major, they're in the winner's bracket, say, okay, maybe they win a match, lose in the next round. Okay, next okay, maybe they win one match and they go 0-2 out. So they go 1-2 in the thing. Okay, that's not a big deal. Then okay, maybe they don't have a great record in the next major. Maybe they limp into winner's bracket or something, and they go 0-2 out or something. 0-2. If a team is doing bad now, they're like, okay, we need to make a team change. But if your team is doing pretty well right now, like Surge or LAG, maybe you're not going to do that. In the future, you're going to convince yourself, oh, you don't really need to. They were doing well at the beginning of the year. They'll find that mode again, and maybe they won't, right? Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't worry too much if I'm you. I'm not sleeping easy with this lead. I think I'll be okay, but I'm not like I'm not sleeping easy. All right, beating the market, still not great. We are both negative on this so far, but again, at this point, it is still very difficult to do this. We have very we this was that was week 3 of this, right? We're starting to get better. Oh, originally we were like 0-3. It's gotten better. LAG should have won. That's like criminal. They should have covered the 2.5 for sure. And then arguably Minnesota had a lot of chances to cover the 1.5 against subliners, and they just didn't. Yours were Heretics also probably should have won too. You could have easily gone 3-0 as well. And then I think the M3 money line, that was really smart. That was really cute. I like that. I actually grabbed that myself. I bet that one myself, and so thank you for that one. And I actually ended up betting subliners against Thieves. I think I ended up getting at -110, but not a big deal. I bet it a couple days later, but yeah, no, I think we're improving, and just because a bet up here doesn't. One, obviously, I make lots of other bets outside of my top three bets, obviously, and those have actually gone pretty well, which is frustrating. But at the same time, if you're making a bet, if you're putting a bet up here and it looks like that bet was good, like if LAG played phase again, would I take the plus 2.5 or would I take the minus 2.5? And I definitely take the plus 2.5 again, like 100%, right? And I think that's what I use. That's the metric I use in college football and in NFL as well. If I make a bet and it loses, I ask myself which side would I rather have had, right? And it's okay. I would have rather had the side I took, or no, that was a horrible deal. Why did I ever bet that side? Then not the bet was wrong. But if it was like, yeah, I think that was the right side to have, then right, that's how I evaluate that.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. Yeah, if you just look at like last week, we were really heavy on the Gorillas, and it paid off for the most part, right? We were 2 out of 3 spot on, including a plus 125. The one that we had the most confidence in was that plus 2.5 versus FaZe, which if you go back and look at that series, like they really could have won map 1. That was a close one. And then the control, which thankfully they covered the round and a half in. Like they very well could have won that round 5 on offense. It came down to just a kill or two, and they would have got that final tick on that zone. So, it was almost a 3 for 3, which I feel like is the trend so far for us. We've had these picks that have just barely missed, and for that reason, we're struggling a little bit out of the gates. I know last week I was debating between Miami and LAG as my number 1 pick, and I went with Miami because I was like, I don't know if I can actually trust this LAG team. We'll see if they can hold their own versus a top team, and thankfully they did well enough, even though they got swept. And the New York pick, I think, was functionally right. It was more just a fade on Thieves from what I've seen so far. We're getting there, and as our models grow and get more data, I think for sure we will improve throughout the year. I think this week it's going to be the first week where we just kill it with picks, but we'll see.
I hope so. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, so this is the updated average margin of victory chart, and I think the margin has gotten a little bigger, but we're not there yet, though. It's still pretty tight in terms of margin of victory on some of these. This is still the lowest we've seen in functionally the CDL era. Yeah, that's. Do you think? Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Week 1 is 51.2, and it's come back up actually closer to average. Sorry, I was reading it wrong. It's come back up closer to average. But again, though, one whole week of the data, 1/3 of the data is still really low. So on average, it's probably closer to average. Do you think we're going to continue to see the 62 and a halves, or was it just because last week was blowout week, or do you think this is going to revert back down to closer to that 51.2?
I think it will, as fun as it sounds, I think it'll finish somewhere between 51 and 62. The reason I pulled this was because we only had data for week 1 the last time we recorded. We saw week 1 and then the rest of the seasons. And my thought was, wow, these hard points are really close. There have been some years where they get even closer, but the fact that they were that tight to begin with, I think we'll see more blowout hard points, or just more hard points that are comfortable wins. And that has proven to be the case over the last couple weeks of games. And actually, it's been a steady increase. So week 1, those hard points were really close. Week 2, there was a little bit more buffer between those teams. And then week 3, like you said, was blowout week. So that grew even more. I don't think it'll continue to go up. I think it'll normalize where we're at. So we'll see. I think it'll hover around a 60-point margin of victory as we go throughout the year, which, if you compare that to the last couple years, is pretty much right in line with where they should be. So if anything, I think this just says opening weekend, for whatever reason, was an anomaly. I think we had a lot of just good matchups. We didn't really know who was going to come out. We didn't really know how map vetoes were going to work. So now that we're starting to figure those out, I think the gap between teams will continue to grow in hardpoint and in other modes. I included search and destroy and control as well. If you want to flip through those quick, the trends look pretty similar in those as well. Control really hasn't moved much at all, but search and destroy, steady increase in margin of victory. It makes sense with just how matches have gone as of late. We've seen more sweeps. We've seen bigger blowouts. I think that'll come back down to earth a little, but I don't think this game is going to be unbelievably tight in every game mode like we thought it might be after opening weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Search or Destroy. This one is really ballooned out. This is 3 now. And you're really starting to feel it. I think they've really started figuring out Search or Destroy. Anything you want to mention there, or
No, I think at first the question was like, okay, are these maps really close after 1 week because they're very defensive favored or anything like that? And I think we've come to see that no, the map pool is pretty much what it should be. So I think the classic like 6-3 average finish looks like it's going to hold for this year as well. So yeah, it looks a lot like Hardpoint in terms of just how much it's grown. I think we'll hover around that 3 number the rest of the way.
yep. And then Control, again, this is pretty much your average. We are starting to see 3-0s in Control, 3-1s, except Invasion, which is horrible and should be replaced as soon as possible. It's like the Gavutu of this year. And I don't understand. Now, obviously, I'm not picking the maps, and there's probably a reason why. Probably something along the lines of we don't have a better map to do this with. That's probably why that is the way it is. But come on, guys, what are we doing here? Like, why are we playing this horrible map that no one can ever win on? It's just you see it and you're just like, this isn't fun. I don't know why this is happening. But on
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
yeah, all I have to say, this one has stayed pretty steady at the 1.8, 1.9 mark throughout the year, so expect that to stay unless the map pool changes drastically. If Invasion were to get subbed out for some other map, expect this number to grow, actually, maybe even more, just because Invasion goes to round 5 a lot. I do have the numbers on that. For each Control map, the percentage of games that go to a round 5, High Rise, which has been played 9 times, 2 times has it gone to round 5, so 22% on High Rise. Karachi, twice as well in 10 games, so 20%. And Invasion, which has been played 13 times, so by far the most, 9 times has it gone to a round 5, which is about 69%. It's about a 40-45% gap in terms of how often we're seeing the round 5. And round 5s are good, don't get me wrong, but when it's just defense and then you get to round 5 and it's defense, it's just boring. And Control will have games that will end that way where defense wins out with only 5 rounds especially. But yeah, it'd just be nice to have another map in the Control map set that is slightly more offensive favored so the rounds aren't so do or die. Yeah, we'll see if that changes, but for now it is what it is.
Yeah. So this is a graph here. Shout out to Doug Leby on Twitter for doing this. This is similar-ish to the graphs you see on usually during the NFL season about like playoffs, like odds of going to playoffs and whatever. So it's a cool idea and I love this graph. Again, one of the things you see here right off the bat is Big Four, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. They're locked into winners already. Miami at 3-2 is also in winners, but now this I'm thinking more about a week ago. But you could really see it then, and you see some other teams starting for it. Boston again, LAG likely but not a lock. Minnesota again likely but not a lock. Las Vegas, good luck next time. Same as Thieves. Carolina, lol. Yeah, there's some interesting stats here. Any team like that's really sticking out to you as wow, I can't believe this team is doing this.
I was a little surprised to see that Boston is like they have the worst odds to make winners bracket out of the 3 that are,
Basically
fighting
not
for 2
eliminated.
spots. Yeah, right now, according to Doug, LAG is in the driver's seat with those 2 other teams. Minnesota is behind them. And it's interesting because those 2 teams play each other. Essentially, the winner of that game locks up a spot. LAG would get to 3 wins, which is totally safe. Minnesota would get to 2 and 4, but I would guess on tiebreakers, they'd have the tiebreaker over LAG, and LAG would be done with matches at that. Or no, they would have one more, right? Yeah. I don't know. It just surprises me that Boston is a half a game up on Rocker They do have a tough game at the end of the week, but to see them only 50-50 is a little bit of a surprise. But yeah, essentially we have 2 spots left and 3 teams that are fighting for them. Technically, Thieves and Carolina could get it, and Seattle's not a lock yet, but assuming that those teams stay where they are, it's Boston, LAG, and Minnesota all fighting for those last 2 spots.
Yeah. Okay, so this was released today. I think yeah, it was released today, but then there was some bugs, so it was promptly some of it was unreleased. Rank play at least was released. Yeah, so rank play was supposed to be released today, but then there was some sort of error, so they took it offline. But lots of new hardpoint hills for all of the important ones. Terminal, they fixed that a lot, so no longer can you just go randomly into that burger place and just turtle up. That's really good. That's a huge improvement. That was a huge problem. So terminal should be a lot more competitive. They've also moved some of the other ones, I think, in Invasion as well. So that's, again, generally should be more competitive. Trophy systems no longer target cruise missiles. That's great. I'm very happy about this because it was always really dumb that a cruise missile, would be taken out by a trophy system. I think this was also a problem in. Oh no, a problem was similar in Vanguard when you would drop a glide bomb on someone and it didn't kill them if they had the one kind of armor. It's yeah, no, you don't die to glide bombs. Glide bombs are just a worse UAV. Some weapon tuning, and then new map Rio arrives again. It actually looks pretty cool. I think we might see that in the future, but not right now. Major, not before Major 1. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see any sort of what impact do you see this having this week or next week?
In terms of the CDL, if they continue to just play on the old patch, then really nothing that's listed here should affect them for the next couple weeks. Because what I've seen on Twitter or X, I should say, is that the CDL will continue to play on the old patch until after the Boston Major, which makes sense because you don't want to throw new hardpoint hills for 4 of the 5 maps 2 days before a bunch of games kick off. So they'll play on that old patch. But the hardpoint hills, from what I've seen, are a success for the most part. Now, the one map that is not listed is Skid Row. And Skid Row, P2 on Skid Row, is the money hill of all money hills. And a lot of people were like, just move that to the lower level of that building and it will be a lot better. It'll still be a pretty strong hill, but the fact that it's on the upper level of that building makes it so hard to break. But yeah, Terminal, the Burger Hill is still in that area, but I don't think you can go like behind the counter and hide in that corner. It's a little more stretched out, so that's better. Subbase, I've heard, not that Subbase needed new hills, but I've heard that they're just in better spots. So that map should be maybe more playable. It's still the weird one because it's so small and fast-paced. Karachi, I've seen maybe it's not quite as good. I think the new P4 is very much just in a wide open alley, and it's going to be tough to get any kind of time on that. Maybe they messed up with that one, but Invasion, they did move that Palace Hill, which I think was P5, out. So that was also a money hill that you could just lock down forever. That's just good to see that they're taking those hills out, or just they're tweaking them enough to make the gameplay a little more interesting so that we're not seeing people rotate with 45 seconds left on the clock. We want to see more engagements, and if there are less money hills, we should. That's good, but again, we might not see those new maps for, a month or so whenever we start matches for Major 2. Trophy systems not targeting cruise missiles is great. I don't know how this isn't a thing from launch day, but they fixed it finally, so kudos to them. Yeah, the SMG is buffed, and the MCW AR nerfed slightly some of the attachments. Maybe we'll see more of a 2-2 SMG AR meta going forward. Again, don't expect that this weekend or next weekend, but in the future, maybe we'll see more SMGs on the map, more engagements overall. Yeah, rank play launching, but not launching today. I thought this might happen because yesterday there was news that, rank play won't go live right when the update hits. We want to do some testing and make sure we're good to go when we launch it. And then the time comes today, and then the developers are like, there's a really big problem with rank play, so we got to delay it. And it's, of course they do, because that happens every year. Fingers crossed that will launch maybe this weekend or tomorrow. We'll see. And then Rio, yeah, it looks good. People seem to like it from what I've seen on Twitter, just playing on it. It looks small, but it could be competitively viable in the future. Maybe if the map rotation changes out, Rio could be a candidate in a game mode. Not that pros are super quick to change the map set, but it's just another potential candidate down the line. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there will be some desire to change some of the maps in the future. Team packs, you can buy those in the Call of Duty League store. Yeah, there's colors and logos.
They're all
Yeah,
right.
that's
Yeah,
they look good, but it's a little bland, I'd say. But yeah, they're okay.
yeah. Some are better than others. I was just happy to see last weekend when we were watching games. It's much, much easier for the viewer when the players on screen are wearing the team colors. For the first couple weeks, I really had to double take a couple times because I was like, who am I watching? Because the camera of the guy would be different than the player that was listed, and you got to check on the colors of the arrows and everything. Now that the broadcast shows the team colors on the guys, it's much easier to watch. But yeah, the team packs are still okay, but I just wanted to say thank goodness they're here because it makes viewing much better. So
Agreed. Yeah. Okay, so challengers. So now there has been an update about this, right?
I don't think so. I checked Daniel's Twitter, the GM for the COD League, and this is still his most recent post, I think, which is from January 4th, which, for those listening, it just says, challenges is our top priority. We hope to get out some news soon. I think maybe they did release some information that there's going to be like 2 in-person challengers events, and that would be it. Or maybe 2 plus champs. I can't remember for sure, but just the fact that it's taken this long is a bummer because there's so many guys and challengers that want to just compete for cups and get into the mix right away and show that they can make a roster spot in the league. But it's been so delayed that it's killed their season in a way. So hopefully that'll get off the ground soon because more COD is good COD.
That's true. Yeah. I think a lot of people are saying, like, this just proves that they don't care about this, and hard to disagree with that. Like, it's our priority. Okay, why are you talking about this in January then? Like, the league's already launched. You're a couple weeks away from Major 1 in the Call of Duty League, and you haven't even started the Challengers League yet, like the lower league. What are you doing here? This is not good. But anyway, match previews. Here we go. So we're going to talk about our matches for this week, and all our odds are through Bet365 as usual. Friday, Minnesota versus LAG. Minnesota plus 120 on the money line. LAG is a favorite at minus 163. Minnesota plus 1.5 minus 188. LAG minus 1.5 plus 132. And then they're 10.5 point favorites in the hard point. 1.5 point. They're slight favorites in the search and destroy, and then somewhat big favorites in there, but it's still favored to go to a map 5. So, what are your thoughts on this one? I will say I actually have Minnesota as slight favorites in this, which is weird for me because I don't understand why I have that. I have LAG as massive favorites in the hard point, which is not weird for me because accuracy is a player in this game. But I do have Minnesota as favorites in the search and destroy, which is a bit weird, but I guess it's definitely possible. What are your thoughts on this one? Where do you have everything?
Yeah, honestly, when I first saw these prices, I was a little shocked to see LAG with a number, a minus and a 163 next to their name. And then I looked at my numbers and I get it. I think it's totally justified. And I'm surprised you have Minnesota favored. They did get their first win last week against a depleted Carolina Royal Ravens team. It was a sweep, which thankfully it was at least a sweep, because if it wasn't, then I would really start to panic about Minnesota. But the fact that they got it done in 3 maps is good. Map 1 was really close. I think Minnesota won by 8 points in the hard point. So that you don't love to see. But they're on the board. But yeah, LAG to me are the better team. They have an extra win. They have gone through a gauntlet of a schedule. When you look at who they played, 3 of those big 4 that we mentioned earlier, and they've held their own with all of those. They really could have beat New York. That went to a map 5. A couple of maps in there could have swung the other way, and LAG could have been winners for that. They played Atlanta last week, and they got swept, but like we said earlier, a couple of those maps in there were really close and could have gone the other way. And then LAG, I think their opening match of the year was against Toronto. They did take the Search in that series, I believe, but got blown out in the rest of them. So that wasn't pretty for them. But you add all that up, and LAG looks like a competitive team. They don't look like a bottom-of-the-barrel team. And Minnesota, to me, does. Congrats, they got the win against Carolina. That's great, but they haven't played a gauntlet of a schedule. They played Optic once. But outside of that, very winnable games, and they haven't been able to come through in any of them. I like LAG here, surprisingly. I was on them last week with you, and I think I'm still going to roll with them. I'd love to see Minnesota win as a Rocker fan, but I don't know. LAG might be league average, and that's a shock to say, but yeah, we'll see how this one shakes out. Obviously, a huge match, right? Winner of this, I think, almost locks up a winner's bracket spot. LAG should for sure, because they get to 3 wins. Minnesota, it would help a ton, but it'd only be their second win. But yeah, a huge match to kick off the weekend. Not in terms of talent, but in terms of importance for the major.
Yeah. I do think it's the thing is my model does a weird thing where if I think it's a close game and then whoever I think is favored in the Search Destroy then becomes slight favorite, because if it's this is close and then it goes to game 5, then it puts a lot of weight on that game 5. And I have Minnesota as huge favorites in Search, which I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think LAG is actually that bad in Search and Destroy. I do think LAG should be favored here. I do the minus 10.5 in the hard point. That's a pretty low hanging fruit there. As even is maybe some of the taking a crap. Like if it's not an invasion, a minus 1.5 at plus 137 is not horrible either. Basically, just betting on this Minnesota team to be not good in respawns, which is a pretty good bet, I'd say. Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking a shot or two at that. So, yeah, I'd probably bet LAG here. I don't know. My model's still going to do some weird things, just because I think the problem is really Boston. Boston is this weird hinge where it's like my model hated Toronto, and then all of a sudden, then they did well, and then it's like, oh, okay, their loss against Boston did nothing, because they lost 3-0 to Boston. My model thinks Boston is horrible, just for the record, which is interesting because I think a lot of people don't view Boston that way. I think they think they're a good team. But my model thinks they're horrible, and I think even LAG, even somewhat underperforming against Boston, means that the model thinks they're bad. And I think that's part of the problem. So I think it needs a bit more data there, but yeah, I'd probably take LAG here, especially maybe some of these softer lines in some of this stuff. Even the minus 1.5, right? Because if you say, okay, LAG is just better in the respawns, maybe Minnesota's good in the Search and Destroy, but then you just say, okay, cool, LAG wins map 1, loses map 2, then they win 3 and 4, and then it goes 3-1, right? That's not... Plus 137 there isn't bad, right? I think those are some smart ways you could attack this line. Moving on to the second game on Friday, Optic versus Miami. Optic, obviously a pretty hefty favorite here, minus 350. Miami Heretics, plus 250. Optic, minus 1.5, minus 138. Miami, plus 1.5, plus 100. Optic 25.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 point favorites in the search, and then 1.5 point favorites in the control. I think we're at a point in this year, at least, where this reminds me very similar to early Cold War. Or relatively early Cold War, when it was like, oh, okay, yeah, they're favorited, but it's 50-50 to whether or not they get the 3-1 or it's 3-2. And then we just saw a bunch of 3-0s, and then it was like, okay, now it's like the minus 1.5 is like minus 250, and then we started parlaying a bunch of minus 1.5s together, and then those would start cashing, and then they had to get even more ridiculous, right? I think we're at a point where, like, even like, again, Subliners versus Thieves last week was minus 1.5, minus 110. Optic versus Miami -1.5, -138. I think this should probably be bigger. I think the reason it's -138 is the Optic price. Honestly, I think this would probably be closer to -110 if it wasn't Optic. But yeah, I think some of these -1.5s, especially when you're looking at a top four team playing a not top four team, is low hanging fruit. And especially with Miami, my model did not like them losing to Boston at all. It was like, this is really bad. What are you doing here? So I think this screams to me Optic all day. What do you think?
I'm in agreement. Yeah, I think I don't love it. The Optic -138 to win in a map 4 or map 3. I think they probably get it done in a map 4, but the price is a little rich, maybe. But yeah, this is a clear gap, I think, in skill. And it sucks to see with Miami. I took them with my number one pick last week against Boston in that game. It did not go my way, but I don't know. Miami, I worry with them. Like, they started 3-0. They obviously lost twice last week. And those 3 wins were against, like, some teams we don't expect to be that good. And last week was a slight step up in competition, and they fell short both times. So Miami may be good enough to qualify for champs, if they can steady the ship and everything. But I don't think they're anywhere close to Optic or New York or the other two for that matter. They could surprise us, obviously. And don't forget, this team used to be Florida Mutineers, and Florida Mutineers beat Optic Texas a lot. Maybe that curse will linger into this match, but I totally agree. I think if there's one way to go, it's just roll with Optic. They look great right now. Obviously, their only slip-up was a round 11 map 5 loss to New York in December. If that goes the other way, we're talking about an undefeated Optic. They've had a lot of round 11 losses in search otherwise, but their hardpoint stats look great. They're blowing out the competition. Control looks steady. Yeah, I just think Optic get it done, and this is a pretty drama-free match, all things considered.
Yeah, I agree with that. Subliners versus Ultra. Subliners, so Ultra the favorite here. Subliners +100 on the money line. Ultra -138. Subliners +1.5 -200. Obviously, this is favored to go to 5. Ultra -1.5 +150. Toronto 12.5 point favorites in the hard point. Subliners slightly favored in the search and destroy. And then Ultra pretty largely favored here in the control. What do I have here? I do have Ultra favored 55%, so it's similar. I've got the prices -137, it's -138. That's pretty good. I weirdly have Subliners favored in the hard point. And then I have Toronto favored in a close search and destroy, a close control, and then I weirdly have Subliners as the better hardpoint team. I think the reason, literally just the only reason being for that is because Toronto lost to Boston in hardpoint. And that's literally it. And I think there is a little bit of weakness in the Toronto Ultra hardpoint. It's not as crisp as I'd want it to be at this point. I still think they're a very good team. I think this is just going to be a very good match. I think a play here is the over 4.5, which is what here? Over 4.5 +150. Yeah, that's not that fun. What do I have over 4.5 at? Only 37%. I only have about a 40% chance, so it's not a lot of value there with the over 4.5. I don't know. This is just a good game, and I think just because you don't see a lot of value in a game doesn't need to bet anything. Just watch a good game. Honestly, I think that's what this is. This is.
Yeah, I'm in a little bit of a disagreement with you. I agree Toronto should be favored, and I think this price, you look at the money line price, that feels about right. Even thinking back on the preseason odds to win champs, there was a bit of a gap between Toronto and New York and Optic. So I think that little bit of a gap shows up here in that match. I think New York have exceeded expectations. Obviously, they're undefeated, and Toronto have, I think, looked the part. They slipped up once, but otherwise they've looked really good. If you are interested in playing this, I think you go map to map, and I'd actually flip what you said. I look at map 1. I think Toronto should be heavier favorites maybe, and that -12.5 is really nothing. I'm just pulling up Toronto's match history so far. So they have won 6 games of hardpoint so far this year. On average, they're winning by 106 points. They are steamrolling anybody they play when they get a win. And they've only lost a handful of times. New York has looked good in hardpoint as well, but no one is blowing out teams like Toronto is. And part of that might be easy competition. These wins have come against LAG, Carolina, Seattle, and LA Thieves. No top tier teams. This will be Toronto's first real test. They haven't played FaZe. I don't believe they played Optic yet. We will find out who is the cream of the crop once this match is over. You look at Search and Destroy, I do think New York are the rightful favorites in that mode. That's been the one area Toronto's had some hiccups in. So I think a Toronto 3-1 to me is the most likely outcome, but if it goes to a map 5, I think New York can close it out. It should be a great game. If you're liking New York, I would just maybe take the -150 or the -1.5 in Search, +137. If you like Toronto, I would lean into the hard point a little bit. Just expect another blowout because that's all they do. Now, again, it's a step up in competition, so we'll see if these things iron themselves out. But yeah, it should be a great match. Probably the best one we've had so far this season.
Yeah, my model it's taking the adjustments for team strength right there. Literally, that's my model. Maybe being a bit too liberal with those team adjustment stats, but that's the chart of my model. So we'll see. But anyways, Saturday now, first match, a less competitive match: Toronto versus Vegas Legion. Toronto -1200 on the money line. Legion +600. Toronto -2.5 +120. Legion +2.5 -163. Toronto 47.5 point favorite in the hard point, 1.5 round favorite in the Search and Destroy, and then extremely favored to just 3-1 or 3-0 Legion here. Just a massacre. This one is a really funny one because it's, on one hand, it's like this is a standee revenge game, but on the other hand, this is an everybody against standee revenge game too, because there's a lot of people who are pretty upset with standee from last year. Yeah, don't know exactly what to. I just don't think this Toronto team. Sorry, the Legion team can just compete with the Toronto team. They can't. And this line, I have far worse than this line probably. What do I have? 99.9%. It's just my model. It just goes to crazy lengths, and it's just, no, there's no way they can win this game. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, similar numbers. I'm not quite at 99, but I've got Toronto at a 92% chance to win. And yeah, this is part of the reason why we don't publish our models right away, because it takes a while to iron out. Do I actually think Toronto, if these teams played 100 times, would win 92 of them? No, I think we'll see. They should do that, and we'll find out. But in my heart of hearts, if these teams played 100 times, say once a day for 100 days in a row, and they could map veto however they wanted, whatever, I think Toronto probably pulls out 80 wins. I don't know, 80% favorite. See, right now, our models are skewing way too high, but that's just what it is because we're only 5 matches in.
That is true, right? And the thing is, you do raise an interesting point, right? Like, okay, if they played 100 times, would Toronto win 92 of them? And the thing is, you phrase that a little off there, because it's not like they play 100 matches right after each other, like not one a day, or they play 100 in one day. It's they play 100 matches at the same time, right? Because if you play 100 matches one after another, then it's basically they learned from each match before, right? So then as the matches progress, the odds would slightly change, right? So it'd be like you clone each player 100 times, and then you set them all down in front of 400 computers and then 400 other gaming desktops. So this is a great use of resources. And you have them play off against each other at the same time. And then you see who wins. And I think, yeah, you'd probably get close to 90 something. Maybe not 99, but it's got to be, I think it is a 90. There's a 9 handle there, I think, at least. I don't know. It'd be interesting experiment.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, as far as the value on this game, I think it's a lot like what I mentioned last game. I would just go map to map if you're interested. Right, Toronto, I just said, like, when they win by 106. Don't be scared of the 47.5. Vegas are they've been okay in hardpoint. They've held their own somewhat. But Toronto is a different beast. If you find them on the wrong map, there's a good chance you're losing by 100, 150. If you like Toronto and you think they just come out hot on Saturday and crush map 1, don't be afraid, even though it's a huge number. On the flip side, I think there's a real case you could say Vegas is a better search team right now than Toronto is. So a plus 137 just to win map 2 outright, or even if you want to play it a little safer, minus 125 just to force a round 11. I think there's value in that as well. Because I'm at odds with those two, I don't really see value for Toronto to sweep or for Vegas to not get swept. I would just play it map to map. So yeah, that's where I see it. I think in all likelihood a Toronto 3-1 is probably what I would lean with. But yeah, I don't be surprised if Toronto just come out guns blazing. The one other thing I will give to the Vegas side of this is Toronto is the last game on Friday, so they really don't have much time to prepare for that first match on Saturday. Vegas, this is their first first match of the weekend, so they should come out looking prepared against a Toronto team that is coming off of a tough game against subliners. That's something to consider on those back-to-backs, but yeah, fully expect Toronto to take care of business here.
So a little bit of extra podcast update. As we said earlier in the podcast, Mike McCarthy has not been fired. That's just correcting the record that Mike McCarthy is not fired. I actually can't believe that. I think that would be more, I think Mike McCarthy not being fired is more surprising to me than Legion winning one of those 100 games against Ultra. Moving on to the second match on Saturday, Miami versus LAG. This is dead even. According to the odds, Miami slight underdog at minus 110, LAG minus 125, plus 1.5 minus 225, LAG minus 1.5 plus 162, LAG 10.5 point favorites in the hard point. Miami Heretics actually slight favorites in the search and destroy, and then my LAG is the slight favorite there in the control. My model actually weirdly likes Miami against LAG. It's weird. My model has been huge on LAG for a while, and now my model seems to really be out on them. That's weird. Alright, that's weird. The thing is, it's really hard to pin down this Miami team. At one point, they're looking really good, and then a little bit later, then they're just losing to Boston. I have no idea what happened in that Boston game. I watched it, and I'm still like, I don't know what happened here. It's very challenging to figure out if this team is what this team is, right? Where do you lean on this? Do you like Miami? Do you like LAG? Where do you go here?
I am where your model was with LAG. I think LAG are still undervalued. And I'm scared to say that because I love LAG against Minnesota on Friday. And then they turn around and play match 2 on Saturday against Miami. Now, Miami also plays Friday. Yeah, they play Optic on Friday. So both these teams are coming off back-to-backs. But I look at what LAG did. Like, you look at what they've done so far, right? They've taken care of LA Thieves. They've swept LA Thieves. And they beat Boston Breach, who we expect to be mediocre team. Not the bottom of the barrel. Maybe you have different views on Breach, but I think Thieves and Breach at the end of the year, we can expect those teams to fall anywhere between 6th and 9th in the standings, most likely. Maybe they have some really bad seasons and we're way overestimating them. But the fact that LAG took care of business with those teams easily, and they kept it close with those elite teams, right? They played FaZe. They played New York. They played Toronto. I don't know. You have to ask yourself, is Miami more like those elite teams or like Boston or like Thieves? And to me, they are in that bucket. On the flip side, you look at Miami and you go, okay, they got to step up in competition last week and they could not come through. But when they played Vegas and Carolina, like, they looked phenomenal. But a lot of teams look great against those teams. It's a tough one to call. I lean LAG here again. That minus 1.5 at plus 162 is really juicy. I do think Miami is a significant step up over Minnesota. So I prefer LAG in their match versus Minnesota, even with the worst price. But yeah, I have LAG slightly favored in every game mode. You can see the books have that as well. yeah, I'm rolling with LAG back-to-back days. We'll see if it works, but that's just where my model's at right now, and I don't want to fully buy into the model, but I'm getting good vibes from the LA Gorillas. Miami, this is a great spot for them to bounce back, especially if they lose to Optic the day prior. But I don't know. Something about LAG right now is really catching my attention.
Yeah. I this is where the model could do weird things, and I think the model is can be wrong at times, especially this early in the season. Yeah, I do like LAG. Give me LAG here. And the thing is, again, here's the thing. You're watching that game against Minnesota on Friday. They come out and crush Minnesota as they're mid game. Like they destroy Minnesota in the hard point, immediately come here, get this line. Right? This line isn't going to exist Saturday morning. You're betting this Friday afternoon, that's totally fine. Just unload on this. Unload on heck even this, right? On the money line here. Just start unloading on these lines. This line too, right? If so these are things to consider, and you bet a lot of this stuff live. Not that game live, but the game before live. Seattle versus Minnesota here. This is an interesting one. Seattle 300 minus 300 on the money line. Minnesota plus 225. Seattle minus 1.5 minus 120. Minnesota plus 1.5 minus 120. Seattle 20.5 points favorites in the hard point. 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then slight 1.5 point but plus 120 favorites in the control. I actually weird. Why does my model like Minnesota? My model is Minnesota. There's got to be something wrong with this. There's no way. I don't understand why my model likes Minnesota. What did they do? They won one game, right?
Yeah, they swept Carolina last week in what was a
And that's
pretty
it, right?
expected outcome, but yeah, otherwise they've lost everything else.
And Carolina lost every other game too, right? Or no, they
Carolina
won one game.
reverse swept Vegas, I think. And we
Okay.
mentioned Vegas earlier. I think that's 2 reverse sweeps against Legion this year, which is tough.
Yeah. So there's no way my model should not be this high on Minnesota. So yeah, that's definitely a problem. So yeah, again, Seattle's pretty good. Take Seattle here. This should not be. This is again another minus 1.5, right? Kind of some of your lower hanging fruit here on the minus 1.5s, the minus 20.5, some stuff like this. Even maybe even the search line there too. Seattle's a pretty good team. They're kind of like next up there, next to like Heretics, and actually that's about it. It's like Heretics and LAG basically. It's those three. They're the next up there for the tier below the top four. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, like a lot of games I've mentioned this week, I think map by map is the way to go. And this might just be a theme with how books are playing it early in the season, is that, when there's a team that is expected to be a step above the team they're playing, like in this game, Seattle is a step above Minnesota. I've got Seattle at an 80% chance to win. That might be a little high, but still significant favorites. The book just blindly says, all right, if they're going to be that big of a favorite, they should be favored in map 1 pretty significantly, in map 2 pretty significantly, and in map 3. Where I see value is, yes, Seattle might be a step above Minnesota, but it might not be that clear cut that, like, obviously they're better in hardpoint and search and control. To me, Minnesota might be a slightly better hardpoint team than Seattle. Seattle did have a pretty long hardpoint losing streak before they broke that against Miami last week, but a lot of those losses for Seattle were against top teams, so that's another thing to keep in mind. But Minnesota's been competitive in hardpoint all year. They have a better margin of victory. They've played some tough opponents. I think the plus 137 on Minnesota is viable. I just, if anything, I'm uncertain who's the better hardpoint team. And on the flip side, Search and Destroy map 2, the Seattle minus a round and a half is a little enticing. It is minus 120, which is maybe a little high for your liking, but like Minnesota has had some search losses this year where they just look completely lost on the map and they lose 6-2 or 6-3 and it's not even close. And Seattle, I think right now their bread and butter is Search and Destroy. That has been how they've gotten some key series wins, and this is a pretty easy opponent to get a search win against. To think that Seattle can get it done before round 11, I think, is a smart play. So yeah, maybe a little back and forth, but yeah, fully expect Seattle to take care of business.
Yeah. Next up, the last match on Saturday, FaZe versus Ravens. Again, even a bigger favorite than Ultra versus Legion here. 6,600. Jeez. -2.5, -175. You're pricing in, what is that? It's more than, that's like a 75-ish% chance of a sweep.
No, that's way too high. Because minus 200 is a 66% chance. So minus
66. So it's
170,
like a 60 some odd percent chance, right? Yeah,
60
60 some odd
maybe.
percent
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah.
60% chance of a sweep. For 62.5 point hard point spread. That's nuts.
Yeah.
1.5 -200. And then there's not even a spread for map 3. It's just a number.
Yeah,
Gotta love
that
that.
surprises me. I don't understand why they wouldn't put a spread on map 3. I guess it's so fluky with how few rounds there are, but
yeah, because with
still,
only 3
I
rounds,
don't know.
think about it. It's like basically saying we think they're going to 3-0, but then if we hang a -2.5, we'd have to put it at such an insane number that, like, people would bet London and then it would throw the whole thing out of whack, right? Because it's like London win
London.
1 round in control. Sorry. Oh, my bad.
London.
Carolina. There you go. I got caught. It would be like if Carolina wins 1 round, then it just destroys the entire market. So screw it, we're just putting a money line on this. Yeah, wow. I don't even need to look at my model. I know what my model's going to say. Oh, at 97.7. So actually a smaller chance than Toronto against Legion. That's weird. Where is it here? Yeah, I have... I actually have... No, that can't be right.
Don't tell me
Something's
you have
off
Ravens favored. 97%.
No. I don't have Ravens favorite. No, I don't have Ravens favorite. No, but something's weird in the hard point line that doesn't make sense.
What's up? Talk through it, Robert. Let me hear it.
It looks like it's saying it's like a toss up for the hard point. It doesn't make any sense because then I have them a 97% chance that's impossible. Something's weird.
Atlanta is guaranteed to win search and control because I kind of see it that way. Yeah, this is maybe the closest our to win percentages have been. You said 97. I have 96.2% for FaZe. So we're very close in that. The one thing I'll say about this match, because this match is very likely to be a 3-0 and not competitive, and this sucks that it's the last match on Saturday, because who is going to stay tuned in to watch it? I guess fans of these teams, but Atlanta FaZe.
No, there's football on. It's okay.
Oh, true. Yeah. There's football.
This is the Packers game. So
the Packers. Okay. The Packers are playing right now, so never mind. FaZe have won 6 hard points this year. They've lost 1. Of those 6 that they've won, they've cleared 62.5 points 1 time. And to make things worse, that was against Seattle. Map 1, which, if we recall our picks from week 2, I took Seattle plus 25 or something in map 1. And of course, that's the only game Atlanta has won by margin all year. Their other wins are 12 points, 20 points, 22, 20, 25. And against some teams that are not great, like Boston, Thieves, Surge, LA Gorillas, Vegas. Carolina is not a good team, but if there's any mode that they can compete in, it is hardpoint. And FaZe has showed that they maybe aren't going to blow out teams in that mode as often as we might think. So the plus 62.5 for Carolina is enticing. Nothing else in this series is. I have no interest in taking FaZe to sweep because I think Carolina maybe has an outside shot to win that map 1. Or the search is weird, right? It's 11 rounds, very few engagements. Maybe Ravens pull out a win in that one. Control is very likely not happening for them unless it's like invasion and Carolina just wins 3 defenses or something like that. But yeah, overall, not interested in anything, but I did want to share that nugget about FaZe hardpoint. They're not winning by margin, and it might come back to bite them down the road. They have another game on Sunday, which we'll get to in a bit, but just know that Carolina could make it interesting in this series.
So that is interesting then with phase and hard points. I hadn't thought about that because then, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. That's why my model doesn't like them that much than the hard point. That makes a lot of sense. So then in this case, then do not bet the plus 2.5. If London's best shot is to win a hard point, instead of betting plus 2.5, you could at plus 125. You could bet map one money line at plus 650.
Yeah, you could do that. You could just say keep it close, 60. Or yeah, whatever you want to do.
The 62.5 is very enticing for the simple reason that at a certain point, it's the correct decision to let them cover a spread that big, right? This is the thing, right? This isn't the NFL where, to some extent it is, right? But the thing is, in the NFL, you're trying to win the game, but at the same point in time, you obviously want to try to get it up by like multiple scores. But at a certain point, it's, yeah, okay, fine, we'll score, or we'll just kick a field goal instead of trying to go for a touchdown because we're already up by so much, right? And it's the same as in this, right? Especially, and we've talked about this before, if the opponent has the hill, and that hill's going to let them get to 200 points, and you're at 230, you just say, okay, fine, just go to the next hill. Doesn't matter. They cannot win the game. And honestly, the next hill is a money hill or a hill we can set up a good defense on. Just let them have it. Doesn't matter. Fine. And that you don't even need that. You need like 190. You need like 188. So like at a certain point, it's fine. Let them get to 195. It doesn't matter. We'll win on the next hill. So that plus 62.5 is actually pretty enticing. That's a pretty, especially if they haven't won that much in hard points, and those have been closer hard points. Especially with some of these lower teams, at a certain point they're going to try to do something to be like, hey, we actually have to say we haven't completely given up yet. So I think there's some value there at some point. All right, moving on to Sunday. Guess who's playing again? Carolina. There is I don't know how or why they did this, but there is a weird quirk in the schedule where like people who play the last game on one day end up playing the next game the next day. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah,
and there's so many because I've gone through, because basically what I do is when I first built my model for this year, I went through all of the games for the entire, like all the days for the entirety of the season, and I basically copied them all into an Excel document, so then, because the schedule is set, so I just throw it in when I'm done. And there are so many, it's literally once or twice a week at least. The team that played the last game before plays the next day. And I don't know how they did it, or why they wouldn't, because if you're building any sort of program, hell, I could build a program that wouldn't do that. I could build a schedule generating program that wouldn't create that system. I don't know why they did that. We're the weird people who care about this. Other people, they don't care. But it's the weirdest thing, and I don't understand why this exists. You could just make this not happen, but yet it does happen for some reason. I don't know if it's a weird glitch in their system.
Yeah.
But it can't, it's either a weird glitch, because it can't be by design, because there's no advantage to having this.
Yeah, I don't like it at all. Like, it's weird, and we notice it because we talk about every game every week. But, like, the teams care, probably, right? If you're Carolina, you play the last match on Saturday. That's your first match of the week, is the last match on Saturday against one of the best teams in the league. And then you have to turn around, what would that be? Like, 12 hours later? I don't know. No, that's maybe not. 16 hours later? Whatever it is. And you have to play an LA Thieves team. That it doesn't matter who it is. It could be Boston. It could be LAG. It could be Toronto, for all I care. Carolina that's such a disadvantage to them. And this is Thieves' first match and only match of the weekend. So Thieves have, in theory, they've had a month to plan out, or I shouldn't say that because there were games last weekend. But they've had all week to prepare for Carolina. And they play them first match on Sunday. And Carolina have to do this delicate dance where they have to prep for Atlanta for Saturday night, and also LA Thieves the very next match Sunday morning. To me, that's just really bad scheduling. With that being said, if Carolina do get blown out against FaZe, I don't know if things get better for them in this match, but I don't know. Maybe you want to talk about what you have for your numbers, because I know you're a little down on LA Thieves.
Yeah, I got Carolina favored. My model does not like them at all. Now, my model likes Carolina in the hard point, which is weird, but it doesn't like them at all in the search or the control. So that is odd. But
I buy that. I totally buy that. LA Thieves have the worst hard point win percentage. They've won 1 out of the 9 that they've played. I get it. Yeah, Carolina's kind of scrappy in that mode. I think Thieves are, at least league average-ish in search and in control, where Carolina just have shown very little in that at all. I get why the LA Thieves price is as high as it is, but if you're Carolina, this is winnable. It's just, to me, it's so tough having come off that phase game, and then Sunday you have this right away. That's where I land. But if you're out on Thieves, I get it, because they have looked brutal this year.
Yeah, I think I agree with the model on that one. I think I'll take Carolina here. Subliners versus Boston. Oh, look, another -1.5. That's about even money. So many of those. Subliners -334 on the money line. Boston +240. Subliners -1.5, -125. Breach +1.5, -110. Subliners 22.5 point favorites in the hard point. 1.5 round favorites in the search and in the control as well. But in the control, it's +120. Yeah, I know what the model's going to say here. The model's clearly going to say New York. 96% chance of New York to win. 50-50 3-0. Just a decimation across the board. Boston's not good. They're not good. I don't understand why this is minus 125. This shouldn't be. This should be like -175 at least. Probably closer to -188, -200. Yeah. What do you think here? Do you agree with my assessment here, or do you think this is a fair price?
I think we are just very much opposed on our views of Boston. Preseason, I had them power ranked 5th. Now, looking back on that, I think that was too high. I don't think Boston is the 5th best team in the league. I did argue that New York might be the best team in the league, but I still power ranked FaZe number 1. And I still think that's correct. But New York are 2, 3, 4, somewhere in there. But Boston, where do you think Toronto lands and everything? Because Boston beat Toronto Ultra. That was the last match before break. And it was a shock to everybody, but they did it in a 3-1 fashion. And I know you're high on Toronto. I don't know. I think Boston has some decent wins on its resume. It's got 3 losses. It's still under 500. But to me, they've established themselves as that next tier down team. They're floating with Surge and maybe Miami if they're legit for that just next crop of teams. I'm not sold on Rocker. I'm not sold on Ravens or Legion. I would take Boston over all of those teams. In this match, it's tricky, right? Because New York is really good. I think New York are significant favorites in hardpoint and in search, which is shown here. Control is a little different, I think. Boston has a better win percentage in control, better margin of victory, and to me, they've played better control teams so far. So again, that +137 is enticing, just considering that I think maybe control is closer to a 50-50. So if I'm going to go anywhere with this, it's just going to be probably Boston and control. I do think subliners get it done. Obviously, I'm taking the heavy favorites in every one of these games to win outright, but just don't be shocked if Boston can take care of the control and somehow split those hard points in those searches, because if that's the case, that's a 3-2 win for Boston. So the path is limited, I think, because it's going to be hard for Boston to win both hard points or both searches, but things I think are doable if they can knock down that control. To me, they got a shot. I would love it if they did win too, because they guarantee winners bracket start. If they beat New York, that'd be their 3rd win, and it's their own major in Boston. So I'd like to see them start in winners bracket at least. But yeah, I think it'll be an enticing matchup. I think maybe closer than what people expect, but I'll say New York get it done 3-2, but Boston makes them work for it.
Fair. Last match, and probably the best match of the weekend. Second best. Obviously, Toronto and New York are playing as well, but Optic versus FaZe. FaZe -175, Optic +125. FaZe -1.5 +137, Optic +1.5 -188. FaZe 10.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 point favorites but shaded to +110 in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control, but that's +162 as well. So that's pretty close there in that control. What does my model have? I probably have FaZe favorite. Yes, I do. I've got FaZe pretty big favorites, 72% favorites, so slightly higher than the -175 here. And I do have weirdly FaZe pretty big favorites over Optic in the hard point actually. But I think Optic plays before this week, right? I think they play one more game or no.
Both play, yeah. Optic plays Miami on Friday, and Atlanta has that brutal game against Ravens on Saturday.
Yeah, I think there may be some opportunities for Optic to maybe become a little big come a little up there in my model. I don't hate Optic, although my model does like Phase. I don't hate Optic here. I think this Phase team has definitely not particularly been challenged much. I think this Optic team is doing fine, but I feel like at some point they're also a little bored. They haven't really played a lot of the best teams. Yeah, okay, they got in a little bit of trouble there against Vegas, but then they pulled it back, so it was fine. So yeah, I don't hate Optic. So I don't hate Optic here. I think this is another game. Just watch this game and see what happens, right? I think it's exciting to see what the outcome of this game will be.
Yeah, I was shocked. So I entered Phase versus Optic in my matchup odds calculator, and I have Optic favored 56%. Now, again, very early in the year, so a week from now, we could look at that and be like, yeah, obviously that was wrong. But all things considered, I do think Optic can put up a fight in this series. I understand why FaZe is the favorite. They're undefeated. They've been the best team for years and years. Optic have slipped up once against New York a month ago or whenever that was. But like I mentioned earlier, like FaZe and Hardpoint is susceptible. I really believe that. They have not faced a Hardpoint team like Optic this year. To me, Toronto and Optic in New York are clearly the best teams in Hardpoint, and this will be FaZe's first true test. And if they're only beating Surge and Breach and Vegas by 20 points, 25 points, I really think Optic should be the favorites in map 1. Just considering, yes, Optic have a worse hardpoint win percentage, but Optic has had tougher competition, and when they go up against those mediocre teams that I mentioned, they put the beat down on them. A lot of times, it's not even close. Optic just smash those teams. To me, Optic should be a favorite in hardpoint. I think FaZe are a justifiable favorite in Search. They have been amazing in that game mode. It's the same story every year. Last year, FaZe was incredible in Search. The year before that, same thing. We know every year FaZe is going to be great in that mode. Optic have slipped up a little bit, but I think they can compete. And Control is pretty much a 50-50 in my book. So we'll see how that shakes out. That very well could determine the entire series. It frequently does. But yeah, Optic, to me, I think are the value here. I don't say that a lot because they crash and burn somehow throughout the year. But at least from what I've seen so far, I think Optic could get this one. I want that to be the case just because I'd like to see more competition against Atlanta because so many years it's Atlanta and everybody else. But I think this game is going to tell us a lot. If Optic can win and if they can do it convincingly, I think we're set up to have a really good year of COD where FaZe and Optic and Subliners in Toronto are just in the blender with each other and we're trying to figure out the whole year who is the best. So we'll see how it plays out, but I'm with you. I think Optic are the value here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Optic's got a shot here, and I think although we've seen a lot of games so far and we've learned a lot about the teams that are 5 through 12, we have not had much differentiation of the teams that are 1 through 4. And to be fair, some of that is just random chance, right? With more games, we're obviously going to learn more about these teams, but we've learned that those 4 teams crush all the other teams, basically, and that those basically the other teams, how they all interact with each other, but we have really yet to see how those 4 interact with each other. And we're finally going to get a shot at that this week. So I think I'm pretty excited to see what exactly does come from some of the results we see this week. And then obviously going into next week with the major. All right, so our week 4 picks, here we go. I actually went in with the Carolina Royal Ravens against the Thieves there on their Sunday game. Maybe regretting that one a little bit now, but probably not. I think I'll still take that. I do have Subliners -1.5 against Boston. I'm fine with that, and I have Optic -1.5 against Miami. Yeah, I like those picks. I think I've explained them. I feel pretty confident about them. What are you? Do you want to go through your picks?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going back to the LAG wagon. No pun intended, but they were kind to us last week, and I just think they are, right now at least, a step above Minnesota. And to me, that plus 137 is good enough. Now, they're going to have to win 3-1 or 3-0, which makes me nervous because we're still talking about gorillas here. So we'll see. It's also a bit of an emotional hedge. If Rocker win, I'm happy as a fan, but bummed about my pick, so we'll see how that all shakes out. We are pretty much opposed in our number 2 picks this week. They both could hit technically if New York wins map 1, 2, and 4 and Breach win map 3. But I mentioned it before, I think Boston, at least from what we've seen so far, I think they're the better control team. I never love really diving into control just because it's the least played mode of any. We've seen these teams 5 times, 6 times in the mode, so still a lot up in the air. But to me, again, the plus 137 is good enough. I think these teams are maybe a coin flip or maybe Breach favored, so I'll take Breach there. And then I'm with you on Optic, different series. I'm taking the one against FaZe. I mentioned a ton already that I think FaZe is not elite in hardpoint, and I think Optic should be favored. So I'll take Optic there in that one. Yeah, an interesting week of picks, but I think this is the week where we turn things around, Robert. We're due, if you will.
We are due, especially we're on the right track. It's due. Next week, we will be recording on Wednesday instead of
Tuesday.
our usual Thursday. Sorry. Oh, yeah, we're going to record on Tuesday, sorry. The podcast will come out on Wednesday. We'll record it on Tuesday. That'll be because the major is starting on Thursday next week. So, yeah, as you can see, there's a picture of Jordan Love, Packers for him. I was very happy when you guys won last week. I have concerns about you this week, though. You could still
That's
win.
fair.
I'm not saying you can't. But I would say, consider how far you've come this year. I would say that this week. I would say
happy,
you've come pretty far.
If we get blown out by 35, I'm still a happy man.
Yeah.
No one thought
Very
we'd
young
be
team.
Final Four of the NFC. We're fine.
You're still a very young team, young quarterback. You guys are in really good shape. Just this 49ers team is very scary at times. So I'd be a little careful about that. But yeah, no, we will see you guys next week before the major. And we are hoping to have a special guest on for next week. And we'll let you know about that next week when you come. So yeah, see you guys next week. Bye.